Maintenance workers, usually county convicts in green and white striped jumpsuits, come out once a year and half-heartedly try to trim back the encroaching wood, mow the grass set to bloom, the pine seedlings. The wild things of Bois Sauvage ignore them. We are left to seed another year. Esh Batiste. Hello, I'm Kennedy Weibel,
And I'm Rebecca Capone.
and this is Reading Pop Classics. Today, we're discussing Jesmyn Ward's 2011 hit Salvage the Bones. The novel would go on to win that year's National Book Award for Fiction, but when it came out, it was mostly ignored by mainstream critics and didn't drop with a big splash. It sold well enough, as had Ward's first novel, Where the Line Bleeds, also set in Bois Sauvage, but it's not until the National Book Award that Salvage the Bones is recognized by the mainstream critical outlets that help drive book sales. Salvage the Bones follows the Batistes, a black family in Bois Sauvage, Mississippi, over the course of 12 days, 10 leading up to Hurricane Katrina. The 11th day is the storm, and the 12th day is the aftermath. Our narrator is Esh, 15 and the only girl in a family of men and boys after her mother died giving birth to Junior, the youngest of her brothers. Her two other brothers are Skeeta and Randall. The kids live in a dilapidated house in the middle of what is essentially a junkyard along with their alcoholic father. Rebecca, first read, second read?
Second read. So I believe this book was either given to me by you or by our mother, but I do know that it passed between the three of us
Yeah,
with the you absolutely have to read this. This is one of the better books I've ever read. And so that
that would
was
ex- that would explain where my copy went.
yes. So I don't remember. I think you sent it to me and I sent it to mom, or you sent it to mom and she sent it to me. But this was definitely passed around through our family. And it really is.
This was
I
a
just
banger.
This is a banger. I really love this book so much. I think the writing in it is really beautiful, which is something that we will get into more. Um, but I have never heard of, or spoke of this book with somebody that I do not feel like I am standing in the pit. So the
Yeah,
pit is what the family calls their property, that's been in the family for at least a few generations. But it is a dilapidated house, as you said. They're in a junkyard, and I feel like I am standing in it. I feel like my shoes and my body feels like dusty with like the pink dust from the red clay, and that it is humid and hot, and that I can hear the bugs. And that is what I feel when I even hear the title of this book, is I feel like I'm standing in the Batiste property with this family.
I agree. This one, the place and the setting in this one sticks to you. Like it feels sticky and dirty and hot. And growing up in the South, I don't think we quite had the sort of heat they have in Mississippi and South Carolina, but I do know that like just summer doldrums where you turn on the hose and the water's just hot. And they talk about that in this, like they turn on the bath water, it comes out hot, turn on the hose outside, comes out hot.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, and having grown up around hurricanes, those days leading up to it that are just, they're so hot, they're so sticky,
Yeah,
and that kind of building, like humidity in the air that you feel before a storm, is
this is
described
the
so well in this
first
book.
this is the first book in a really long time that someone, like a person in real life, pressed on me. Like someone handed me this book and was like, "You need to read this." A coworker of mine back at the office asked if I'd heard of it, pressed it on me. Like, not a critic, not the internet. I didn't hear about it through Goodreads or Amazon or anything like that. Like a person was like, "Just please read this. It's so good." And I remember when I was reading it, I was flying somewhere and I had it out in the airport, waiting for my bag or something, and more than one person stopped me who saw me reading it and was like, "Are you enjoying that? It's incredible, isn't it?" This was just the first time that's happened in a long time where it felt like it was a book that the world kind of knew about. Weirdly, around that same time, the other one was Where the Crawdads Sing, which
Yes,
I
that is
feel,
also something that is something that I did also. I mean, they clearly now they've made it into a movie and it has grown and it's mainstream popularity, if you will. But that was also a book that I think was personally recommended to me and that I heard other people talking about more so than it was something that came to me through, to your point, the internet, or the media in some capacity. It was just like a word of mouth of like, this is an amazing story.
I'm less positive about that one. Did you read it?
I enjoyed it. I think it's a good story. I think there is a lot of value to it, but I don't think that, but I think if we're comparing it to Salvage the Bones, it's a real unfair comparison.
That's that's about.
It's a real unfair comparison. It was a good story. I enjoyed it. And again, I think it has a lot of value, and I think it had some substance to it, but nowhere near the substance that Salvage the Bones has.
I didn't hate Where the Crawdads Sing, but I mean, maybe we'll do it for an episode at some point because it
Maybe we'll
was
talk about it.
legitimately, yeah, it was a really popular book. And I do feel that a lot of the nature writing in it is like above average, but man, that dialogue, like it was written by an AI that had never heard of humans or met humans. Like I don't know. She must have met people in her life. I don't know what she like.
But I think the woman who wrote it was a biologist
She's met human beings,
by
Rebecca. She has
trade.
met
Well,
human
sure,
beings
she
and heard
has.
them talk.
But nature writing is something that I think probably comes to her is probably far more her forte than writing dialogue.
It was like it was deliberately wrong.
Anyways, but back to Salvage the Bones. Back to Salvage the Bones. The nature writing in this is something that we should also get into because it's so beautiful. Her description of Mississippi and this town of Bois Sauvage.
So this book, we have a female narrator, Esh Batiste. She's 15. She's the one taking us through the story. Does this pass the Bechdel test?
This book does not pass the Bechdel test,
No. Esh is the only woman in the book.
and so I want to talk about that. So there are there are five women represented in this book, and it is our main character, Esh. We do see her mother in flashbacks, so she is a character, and she is certainly a presence or an absence maybe that looms large in the book. China, the dog, is a female. Shalia is Manny's girlfriend. We don't have a lot of interaction or anything with her, but she pops up a few times, and then certainly Hurricane Katrina, also a female. But this book does not pass the Bechdel test because while these women are represented in the book, they do not have conversations at all, much less, conversations that don't surround men. But I think this brings up an interesting conversation about the Bechdel test. Now, in previous episodes, we have talked a little bit about the history of the Bechdel test. And it comes from a cartoonist, Alison Bechdel, who actually made the reference to the Bechdel test as a little bit of a joke. But then it has been something that's been picked up over time and that people like to use to discuss women's representation in media. But this is a nice time to point out again, this was something that she kind of mentioned as a joke. This is not something that was put together by like scholars or, English literature doctoral students and is meant to be this, it's not meant to be this passive like, oh, this is an anti-feminist piece of work because it doesn't pass the Bechdel test. The purpose of using it, I think maybe in general and certainly in our podcast, is that it does give us, I think, interesting conversations about women in these books, how they're represented. Because, we've talked about Valley of the Dolls barely scraped by passing the Bechdel test, but we discussed the ways in which that is how that fits into like feminism and the representation of women in the book. The Outsiders did not pass the Bechdel test, but that was something that felt like a really universal read, even though it was about boys. There just aren't very many women in it.
I think it's worth pointing out also something about both The Outsiders and this book is they are written by women, and they're using the female gaze. Like it is a female point of view. Our narrator in The Outsiders is a teenage boy, but our author is a woman, and the story using The Outsiders as an example, told through the female gaze. We discussed how this isn't really how hoods, greasers, the tough guy, the black leather jacket character is usually portrayed. And that is a representation within itself, that the story is being told not in the voice of, or I'm sorry, it is being told in the voice, but it is being told not through the lens of a male of a male author, like the characters within the story. And this one too, this one has a female narrator, is written by a woman, and the book spends time observing men around her and their behavior.
It does, and it also it explores themes of femininity. It explores themes of motherhood.
It's a very female heavy book to have three human female characters, one storm and one pit bull as the women in it.
Absolutely. To your point, yes, our author is observing the men around her, but her relationship to them, her relationship to to these men, is a big part of the book, and their relationship to motherhood, their response to it, their response to their own mother, their response to Esh's pregnancy, their response to China. Yes, their reflection back on who their mother was and what she left them, how she influenced them. Is that something that we see often in the book? The things that she taught them, the things that she showed them, the characteristics that each of these children have that are like their mother. So yeah, so while this is not a book that passes the Bechdel test, I am kind of glad that we've had these few books in a row that either barely pass or do not pass the Bechdel test, but do have this great representation of women.
When we're pointing out that it doesn't pass, we are not bringing a hammer down. It is a conversation starter and kind of an interesting think piece. How often it comes up that, like, I don't know, two women just do not have a conversation throughout 300 pages or through 2 hours of a movie.
Right. Absolutely. And then again, that even without that in itself does not indicate that something does not have a good representation of women in the book, as we see again, both in Valley of the Dolls and particularly here in Salvage the Bones as well. But so our protagonist, Esh is reading The Myth of Medea. And Medea is a Greek sorceress who slaughters her children to punish her husband for taking a new bride. And I think so she's reading it within the context of the Argonauts. I feel like you knew a little bit more about this literary work than I than I did prior to this.
Yeah, she's reading Edith Hamilton's Mythology is the name of the book. It was something that was assigned to me when I was 15, when I was Esh's age. It was something I had to read for English class. Like Ash, I also loved it. It's just a retelling of those stories without having to wade through the poems. Just here's Zeus, this is who he was. Here's Hades, here's all these people, this is who they were. And then it's got some of the classic tales. It gives you a little short description of where she is pulling the different elements of the story from. This one is mentioned by Virgil, and Homer tells a version of this story that I have used in the middle, and some of the text from this one came from wherever. One of the stories of adventure within it is Jason and the Argonauts in the search for the Golden Fleece, which is where Medea comes in. Jason and his Argonauts go out to some kingdom, ask for this Golden Fleece back. It doesn't matter the what's and wherefores of why this other guy's got the Golden Fleece, but Jason wants it. And the guy sets him up with these like three impossible tasks that he just can't live through, and says if he can do them, he can have the fleece. The guy claims that he himself did them. He lies. He didn't do them. Hera pulls a fast one up in Mount Olympus and like goes to Aphrodite and is like, I need your son. I really like Jason. I need your son to make this lady fall in love with Jason so that she helps him. And Cupid shoots Medea in the heart with an arrow. She falls in love with Jason, and then she betrays her father and uses her magic to help Jason get back the Golden Fleece, defeat her father. She runs off with Jason afterwards, along with her brother. She murders her brother. She rampages pretty hard through the narrative until Jason, once he's gotten everything he wants from the world, most of it because of Medea, he decides he's going to marry some other lady because he wants to like join her father's kingdom with himself. And Medea gets mad and he's like, you need to be okay with this. And she's like, what? We have children. No. And she kills his new fiance, and then she kills both their children. And then she goes up to the roof of their house where Jason is trying to chase her down, and she rides away in a chariot drawn by two dragons. That's the story of Medea. And that's the story that Esh is circling back on over and over and over again and talking about, because it echoes how she feels about Manny.
Right. So she is so she is in love in that way that only teenagers can be, or that
Yeah.
only really young people can be, right? And this love that can't be helped, that can't be changed no matter what, like Manny is clearly not returning her love, but she can't help the way she feels.
It's a good
And we also
description of
see
teenage love from Ward. Like the way she like sets it up and the way Ash talks about it is realistic.
it is so relatable. It's so relatable. It's so something that I think people can identify with. It's something that happens at such a specific time, I think, in your life to kind of have that love. I want to talk about how Jesmyn Ward is an English teacher's dream. Everything in this book, I mean, the writing is incredible, but like the similes, the metaphors, the allegories, the
The
overarching themes,
the illusions, Rebecca. There are mythological illusions
there are
throughout.
mythological allusions. This myth is woven throughout the story. We can see so many, allegories, so many allusions to this myth in there. There are so many things that parallel each other, tensions rising. I mean, and we're going to get into that. So one of the things that I will bring
I
up,
could rip some AP English essays out of this.
I could write 100 A+ essays from this book. There are so many things there are so many small things that you could delve into and just really explore. And we will absolutely do some of that. And so let's talk about Manny a little bit. So for one,
So you could do that, but
Jason and the Golden Fleece.
the problem is they're not going to teach this in high school.
The problem is they will not teach this in high school. So let's talk about, so Manny's always described as like golden, right?
Yeah,
So we talked about how Jason is seeking the golden fleece and the story of the myth, and Manny is constantly also. So this is one of our many illusions in this book, that Manny is always described as gold, by her by Ash. And again, that's where we see that high school, that's that really classic kind of young love, that it's like every time he is nearby, he is taking all of the sun and reflecting gold, because that is the way you see somebody that you really love or you really care about at this young age, right? That it's like they come in and kind of light up the room. It's hard to like not look over at them. She struggles to not just kind of constantly be staring at him. And he does kind of emit that gold. He's got that golden fleece about him. Now, one of the reasons that this is not a book, so this is something when I was kind of looking up and doing some research for this book, that this was a banned book in some places. They
yeah.
didn't want this to be taught in English classes, which I think is an utter failure of our education system. But that is that's one woman's opinion. But part of it is because of the relationship between Manny and Esh. Manny is an adult.
So that snuck up on me because when we first, to give a little context, we hear from Esh in her narration that she has been pretty much just sleeping with any of her brother's friends who come to the pit with no compunction since she was 12 years old. She's just open for business. She's not particularly concerned about it. She tells us very casually that this is what she's been doing. She's 15 now. Manny is the one that she suddenly has fallen in love with when Manny came for her, and she hasn't slept with anybody else now. She's been turning down the other boys for, I think she said 5 months. There's a time in there that she mentions is 5 or 6 months that she hasn't slept with anybody else, because once she got Manny, that was it. Something just like clicked. Cupid got her with that arrow. The way it's described at first, though, because it's her brother's friends, and Ash is 15, and her brothers seem like they're also in high school or around her age. I didn't like the first couple times she's with Manny. I thought Manny was just like, she's a freshman, Manny's a sophomore or a junior. Until, I don't know, we're like a third of the way in the book before we find out that Manny has a live-in girlfriend in the trailer that he lives in by himself, because he's an adult man. He's like 19 years old.
Yes. And so in the relationship is, so that's one of them, right? Is that they feel that this older man has coerced this younger woman into a sexual relationship. And so I want to talk a little I want to talk a little bit about Esh's, I really hate to use the word promiscuity. I do. This is a young vulnerable woman who's lost her mother at a young age. She's surrounded by men, which she does not have female friends in the book that we hear of. She doesn't have close female friends, and these men are constantly around. So I want to talk a little bit about her choices.
For what it's worth, she doesn't seem particularly sad about the choices that she's made here.
She doesn't. But here's something that I think is really interesting because again, this book does have female representation. It does represent the female experience. And so I want to read a quote from the book that this echoes something that we also saw in Valley of the Dolls. And this does echo something that I think women feel. So this is a quote when she's talking about how she feels differently about Manny than the other boys. And she kind of talks about the difference between her emotional connection with Manny and then what she's physically giving these other boys. And she refers to that emotional connection as her girly heart. So that's my context. I'm going to begin the quote. The girly heart that, before Manny, I'd let boys have because they wanted it and not because I wanted to give it. I'd let boys have it because for a moment I was Psyche or Eurydice or Daphne. I was beloved. But with Manny, it was different. He was so beautiful, and still he chose me again and again. He wanted my girly heart. I gave him both of them. So one of the things I think is interesting in this is this concept of I first of all, she says I've let boys have it. I've let boys have it because they wanted it, not because I wanted to give it. For one, she's looking for affection. She's looking for attention and she's looking for love. And she unfortunately feels that this is a way to get it. She's not getting it from her father. Her mother is dead. This is a way that she is
The
getting.
father is very absent. Like their father is
The
just
father is very absent.
a mad Hephaestus with a hammer in his hand, like just wandering through the pit, like banging on different pieces of metal and broken cars and things.
But we see a similar sentiment from Anne in Valley of the Dolls when she kind of settles for Kevin Gilmore, the older man who kind of makes her a famous model. And she also kind of says like she kind of gives in to him because men are always coming on to her and it's easier to just be with one of them than to constantly have to turn men down. And so we see this same sentiment here from Esh that it's kind of just easier to let these boys have sex with her than to not, than to constantly be pushing away this advance. And then she feels different. She feels differently with Manny. And I think that's interesting because I think that if she had some female figure, right? So whether it was a sister, whether it was her mother, even if it was closer friends and more female relationships, then she may have some tools to kind of put this away. This is something that I think a lot of the male gaze, right? The male need and drive for sex from women is something that women deal with from a super young age. She's 12 when this starts, and most women that I know, including myself, the first time and I'm not necessarily talking about somebody your age. I am talking about somebody slightly older that men come up to you and hit on you or say something suggestive or flirt with you in a way that there's this moment like when you're a child of like what is happening, and then that continues kind of for a lot of that continues for the rest of your teenage and adult years, as a female, and you have tools to repel these advances. You learn to become, I don't want to say comfortable with it, but I think that you learn ways to separate it and to push it out and to block yourself and to steal yourself from it in some ways. And this is not something that this woman has had a chance to do. And that I feel like is how she sort of ends up in this situation that she's in with these boys where she's having sex with them, she's letting them. It's just easier than to constantly be pushing this advance away.
She seems fairly apathetic about it. And it seems like it is a door that is open. Grief opened that door and left it open. And she is just sort of like, it's the only attention that she gets from these guys. Throughout the book, with the exception of Big Henry, who we'll talk about, the guys don't talk to her when they're at the pit. Like the other
That's
boys
a
don't
great
interact with her.
observation.
They don't speak to her. She is only there in their mind for that.
That is a great observation. That is a very good point that they don't have a lot of interaction with her. Her brothers are the ones that look out for her and include her in the conversations and include her in the social scene, with the exception of Big Henry.
And I want to talk about them when we get a little bit further along because
I want to get into Big Henry, but I want to talk about this coercion with Manny, right? This is an adult 19-year-old man who knows that he does not want a relationship with this woman, with this girl. She is very young. And while she does come into this relationship, for lack of a better way to describe it, willingly,
He's taking advantage of the situation. That is a very
he is taking advantage, and that is still coercion. When you were older and you have more information and you are seeking this kind of relationship with somebody that is younger, you have the upper hand and you have the power and you have the advantage. And so it is coercion. And that is something that they felt that is something that they've maybe felt like this book was a reason that this book shouldn't be taught. And my argument would be that this is a reason this book should be taught, so that that can be a conversation about
because
what coercion looks like, about what the female experience might be to be in a world where men are viewing you where men are viewing you sexually from a very young age.
well, and this, like everything else in this book, is presented to us without commentary from the narrative. This is the most judgment-free book I think we've read so far that I can think of.
Right.
Like the situation with Esh, she is our narrator. She is describing everything to us in present tense, except for flashbacks. Esh does not offer commentary in it on it. Other characters don't really offer commentary on it. The book does not seem to take a side with the sex life of Esh, the age of any of these characters, uh, the situation in which a lot of these characters live, especially our main characters who live in pretty unforgivable poverty.
Hmm.
The dog fighting, which is, I know, a real hot button issue. I guess, I don't know, is it a hot button issue? I feel like it was briefly. I feel like I haven't heard about it in a decade, but I'm I'm sure when it comes up, people are against the all of it. It's the strength. One of the strengths of the novel, I think, is that we are given this flat, and what she has done is taking characters who are usually the huddled masses that our main characters are looking at, and either, I don't know, do something kind or do something mean. And that's how we know if a main character is a villain or a hero in another book. Like these are people who do not get the front, who do not get the, these are people generally who are not front and center on the stage in any media, not in movies, not in books. Uh, I don't know enough about the theater, but this, like, deeply, desperately poor people who are
Who were pregnant teenagers who were dog fighting.
pregnant teenagers, dogfighting, alcoholic dads. Um, like this is only presented if they're going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and find a way out of it at the end. And at the end of this book, they get Katrina instead. There isn't Katrina doesn't come through and the house blows down and it turns out the gold was buried under there the whole time. Like the storm just happens and everything is just worse. And it's pretty bad to begin with.
Right. But we get to know these characters. They're not
Yeah.
caricatures, they're not representations. We get to know them.
Yeah.
We understand their background. We understand they've lost their mother. We understand why Esh is making these choices and doing this with men without judgment on the character, without judgment on her character, of just like, this is the situation she is in. This is someone who is looking for love and looking to feel valued and looking to feel cherished. And this is and I think that she knows that this isn't really the way to do that, but she's learning it because that's how people learn things, is to go through them.
The very choice of the author to give our 15-year-old poor black pregnant teenage narrator a ongoing sort of commentary on the myth of Jason and the Argonauts and Medea and the place and action of females within that story is itself, like, makes this book unlike anything else that I've really ever read. Like, because she does it without Esh being a savant who's going to get herself out of there. Like, it's not, Esh isn't special for knowing this. She's just an American who can read. Like, it's not
Right.
presented as fantastic. It's not incredible that Esh is reading the book for her summer reading. It's not the thing that sets her apart from everybody else, and all the other characters are like, she's not like other girls. Like, she's just allowed to have an interior dialogue that includes a really common ninth grade summer reading assignment.
And to be able to see herself in a story,
Yeah,
to be able to see herself in a myth and see her own situation and use literature, use this story to reflect on her own experience and her own life, her own thing that's going on. And then I think that we get to see, throughout the book, we get to see how she changes this myth. So it's something I really enjoy in this book, something that I think makes this a beautiful book is the relationship between the siblings in general. And or I guess maybe the whole relationship between the family, because as we've discussed, the father is largely absent,
He's a cranky, irritable
physically and
alcoholic.
emotionally.
Yeah,
Physically and emotionally, this family, their mother has a kind of, I mean, not later in life child, but she's Esh is 9 when her mom is pregnant, or 8 maybe when when her mom is pregnant with Junior, and her mother passes away, giving birth to Junior. And then the dad comes home and just sort of like hands over Junior, like, yep, here's your brother, your mom's
yeah.
dead,
Ash
and
and
then just
Randall raise
leaves.
raise Junior
And Esh and Randall raise Junior. And
more so
something
than
I think,
Skeeta, who is obsessed with that dog, which drove me a little bit nuts.
yeah, so we do see throughout the book his obsession with China. The family tries to draw his attention back to other important things that are happening, and he continually focuses on the dog. However,
He's the
he is the most he is the most observant about Esh. He knows that Esh
yeah.
is pregnant so quickly, and he doesn't say anything to her. He doesn't say anything to her. He doesn't put her on the spot about it, because I think that he sees that this is something that she is still working through, but he looks out for her and he has her back. And we see that in moments. We see that in moments throughout the book.
I have this is
And he knows about Manny.
I have two criticisms about the book, or two weak points, maybe not criticisms, but the relationship with the brother. Do the brothers know that their friends are just coming out there all the time and sleeping with their sister? Because the book really focuses on like Skeeta caring for Esh and the bond between these siblings and how much they care for one another. And it seems like the boys aren't super concerned at like every guy they know. She names, I don't know, 6 or 7 dudes that are like part of the regular crew who are coming out there.
They are maybe not also, we've discussed that this is a book that does not offer a lot of judgment of
It
its
doesn't.
characters and the things that are going on. And we've also discussed this is a choice Esh is making. Now, we've discussed what coercion is in terms of an older man, in this case Manny, and a younger female, and what coercion can mean and how those things can be different from forcing somebody into a situation, which is why we use the word coercion versus a harsher word like rape, right? So she's making these choices to be with these boys. And so I guess they are not, she has agency.
She's got agency. The character, yeah, the character has agency and tells us, and we have no reason to doubt her that she is aware of the decisions that she's making, and she's not been tricked or lulled or
So
drugged
they're
or
not
anything like that.
they're not offering judgment. They're not judging Skeeta for his relationship with China and that kind of thing. I mean, they get frustrated with it sometimes of like, we have this hurricane coming, we're trying to prepare for it. There's other things going on and you need to tune in a little bit. But there is not a judgment about his relationship with the dog. If anything, they understand and support it. So I think that they are supporting is maybe not the word, but like I don't think that they're going to step in and be judgmental about what their sister
Do,
is doing if
do
they
they not
understand that she
know?
has agency.
Do you think they know?
I think they know. I think that it's very clear this
Manny tells us that they know. I don't know if I believe Manny.
Skeeta knows about Manny.
Yeah,
There are instances that we see that in the book. And it's the tension, and that's the driving tension between him and Manny. I mean, it kind of comes the dogs tend to be a little bit of what they're talking about, but the underlying tension is you've been sleeping with my sister and you've gotten her pregnant. And we know that and they know that he's not going to do the right thing. They
it's
know
just
he's not going to do they know he's not going to handle this well.
I guess it's just the thing that stands out to me is like that's the line. They're like, no, we're friends with all these guys until you get her pregnant, and then now it's a strange line to me, but
But I don't think it's about getting her pregnant. It's that he's going to have the reaction that he has, and they know it. He is somebody they talk about how he's constantly cheating on Shalaya, his girlfriend. She knows he's constantly cheating on her because she's like fighting all of these other women. She's not dealing with the fact that Manny is the common connection, but that's her cross to bear. It's that he's not going to do the right thing. That I think is what they take umbrage with.
Yeah, I guess it also it works in the book. The other problem, maybe it's not even a problem. I'll tell you. In the Katrina scene, they the water starts coming up through the house. They run up into the attic. The water starts coming up into the attic. Skeeta gets up and he's like, I am not going to drown in this attic. We are not drowning in this attic. He starts banging on the ceiling, banging on the like eaves, trying to find a way out. Randall pushes him out of the way and says, stand back. And he's got a chainsaw. And he says, Dad, is there? He starts banging on it with the chainsaw. And he says, is there any gas in here? And the dad says, I don't remember. And he starts it and he's able to cut two parentheses in the ceiling. That then the thing cuts out. He bashes through the ceiling and they all come out on the roof. And we'll talk about like the rest of the scene later. Where did the chainsaw come from?
We're just up in the attic. He's like sitting on it when they
Get
come
out
up
of
into the attic.
Come on.
There's junk all over the place. There's junk all over
There's
this,
just
all over
a
the yard.
magic chainsaw with gas in it up in that attic that no one. He just finds a chainsaw. Like you're the writer of this scene. Literally anything else. Like it doesn't need to be a chainsaw. She got to make it up. Why a chainsaw? That man
Because
had that man was trying to drive a tractor over a chicken coop earlier because he couldn't knock it down and he lost three fingers in the process and he had a chainsaw this whole time. He knows he owns a chainsaw.
well, maybe he doesn't. He is drunk all of the time. He's on painkillers.
Where
He's
did the
taking
magic
painkillers and
chainsaw come from?
antibiotics for the fact that he's lost his fingers, and it's to the point that he's making himself sick because he won't stop drinking. And while we're discussing the father, I did want to
Wait,
bring up
where did you don't have any? You don't. Where did it come from? It just
the chainsaw
the attic just magically had a
because
gassed up
because
chainsaw.
they live in a salvage yard.
It wasn't in the yard. It was in the
I know,
attic.
but I think that there's just junk around. They live in just piles of junk.
I would like to invite our listeners. I read that scene over and over and over again, and I was like, maybe it's a metaphor that ties into the Medea myth. I couldn't make that fit. I went back and I was like, maybe it's Chekhov's chainsaw. And there's a comment earlier in the book where Randall is like, I need that chainsaw. I haven't seen it since Dad took it up to the attic. Nope. I'll invite our readers, or I'm sorry, I'll invite our listeners who have read this book. If you've got a theory on the magic chainsaw, or you think that it fits into the Medea myth, which is heavily present within the roof scene, because that's how the Medea Jason Golden Fleece story ends, you can write and tell us about it at readingpopclassics@gmail.com. But I think I feel like earlier there was like a call to it, and somewhere in the editing it got cut out and it got missed that like there's arbitrarily exactly the thing they need to cut through the ceiling up in this attic with no other. Everything else in this is
I
so
didn't
tight.
I didn't question it at all because there's just so much crap around. Like they're always finding what they need because they live in essentially a junkyard. So I didn't remotely question this.
They
But
never
I
have
want to but I
anything
want
that
to move
works.
on.
They never have any power tools, and suddenly they have a functioning gas-filled chainsaw in the attic that is appears and then disappears. And
I don't know. I feel like this family can have one win. I guess that's how I feel.
well, that's
Anyways,
why I want to know, what is it? Is it the one win? Is it like a touch of magical realism? Realism? I'm sorry, a touch of magic, like in the myths where Hera steps in, or like is there some connection that like I'm just like too feeble brained to make? Because I guess you didn't know. I felt it was glaring.
I did not feel that way. To me,
Oh, all
because
right.
of all of the things that are referenced throughout the book and the fact that there is just junk around all of the time, to me it was like, of course, of course this is in the attic. Why wouldn't it be?
I
But
okay. I,
I personally didn't question it. I do see your point. I do understand what you're saying. It's also a
because
random thing.
it
It is
doesn't need
also
to
a
be
random
there.
thing to have in an attic because they do have so much junk that seems to be all over like the yard and in the shed and stuff that I guess it is like, well, why is this a thing that's in
If
the
you told
attic?
me the roof had just rotted through so badly, because like you said, you feel every bit of this book like The yard is filthy. The clay is everywhere. The drywall is peeling away from the walls of the house. Like the house is wilting and suffering. If you told me Randall and Skeeta put their boots through the ceiling because the roof had rotted so badly because the shingles were gone and that's how they got out, I wouldn't have blinked. The chainsaw is really specific.
A chainsaw is specific, but he is just using it initially to batter a hole in the ceiling, and
I
then it
know
kind of comes up of like, oh, is there some gas in here?
that's what stands out even more. It could have been something else. Like they could have found the old sledgehammer up there or a cinder block or something not a something that just didn't. I don't know. I thought it just really stood out. Just me? Okay. All right. Well,
Maybe not. I Listeners, please email. This is clearly burning a hole in his brain. So please email
yes.
us if you have thoughts on the chainsaw, because we are at odds here. That to me did not stand out even a little bit. Um, but I want to talk. But I want to point out. So I want to talk about the dad. I want to talk about these boys a little bit. I want to talk about the dad. Um, something. So again, the mother has passed away. The dad just kind of comes home from the hospital where their mother has died and announces like, "Here's your little brother. Your mother's dead," and just hands over this kid for Andal and Esh to raise. So Esh is already experiencing motherhood to an extent. I also wanted to point out that an early description of the dad, when he's like starting to prepare, he's announcing like we're going to have this storm. He wants to prepare for the storm. Here's a description, an initial description of the dad. For a moment, he looked not drunk. And I feel like it says everything about a character if the way that you describe them is that for a moment they look not drunk. I feel like that just sets up a whole lot about this father. This is a man who is not around physically. This is a man who is not around emotionally. This is a man who has kind of given up on parenthood.
No, it tells you a lot. For a minute, he looked not drunk. That's a heavy couple of words. Or I'm
And then
sorry,
we
a
see
heavy
throughout the
handful.
book,
That is a heavy handful of words.
right? We see throughout the book, he does not notice anything that is going on with his children. He is very focused on the storm.
I will say something that just you and I grew up in a hurricane-prone part of the country. The apathy that everyone has towards the approaching storm is so spot on.
Yes,
Because the
100%.
minute hurricane season hits, the weather and the Weather Channel and the news and the Chicken Littles all around your particular town and neighborhood all just start going nuts for every little thing that's out there. And 99% of them don't materialize. I
Right.
was just like, I remember that, but there's you know, Hurricane Morgan's out there. Like, all right, like, talk to me in 3 days if it's,
If this is something right.
yeah, talk to me
Um,
when it's closer to landfall. I'm not going to the hardware store. I'm not buying milk and bread until this is a little bit closer.
something else about the dad. We'll get to this because I think that the storm scene is there's so much to talk about. It is, in my opinion, one of the best parts of this book. But a little bit of foreshadowing, as we were talking about how this is such a book ripe for an English essay. They're afraid of their father.
Yeah,
So we see in the beginning, like again, he's he's not drunk. That's a description of him. Um, so Skeeta is in there's two houses on the property of the pit. So the house that our Batiste family lives in, and then the sort of skeleton almost of the grandparents' house.
it's where we get our title from. Is so the land they live on, the pit as they call it, was owned by their mother's father. And back in the day, he let guys use it as a dump for money, essentially. It's a decent amount of acreage. It's fairly large. And he let guys use it as a dump in exchange for money, which is why there's all this crap all over the pit.
And
And
they were taking land. They were taking like dirt and clay to use for
they were
building
taking
and stuff.
clay, they were dumping things there. He was selling the dirt, he was accepting money for dumping things there. And then Esh and Skeeta and Randall's grandfather on their mother's side helped their father build the house that they live in for his wife there on the same property. And so the matrilineal grandparents' house is still over there. empty because they've died, and they
And they are constantly salvaging things from it.
pulling wood out of it, shingles, like any furniture, doors, window frames, glass, anything they can get out of it. And it's where we get the title Salvage the Bones.
It is. And we should also point out that so the grandfather was letting, people come and take the dirt. And then that has created a big basin that has created a pit in
They
itself
swim in it.
That fills with water and they can swim in, and it is fed by a creek.
Yeah, it's their
That
swimming
is
hole.
and it is part of the reason. So that decision by the grandfather long ago, and he realizes like this was a bad decision. I'm going to stop doing this, and it starts to become the dump. That's what creates the flooding.
Yeah,
That's why they get such terrible flooding. Is that that decision from long ago, and the water source
that's really tight
that they get such
storytelling.
bad
It's a
is
really
what
good
yeah.
callback. That's why the chainsaw doesn't make sense.
I will not talk about the chainsaw anymore. Anyways, Skeeta is in the house pulling linoleum out of the house. He's salvaging something from the house. He wants to put a linoleum floor in the shed for China because he's worried that the first puppy has died. He's worried that the first puppy has gotten a disease
The
or an
book opens
illness
with China the pit
from the
bull
dirt.
giving birth to, I believe it is
Five.
five puppies that she gives birth to. I'm sorry, she gives birth to six puppies. One is stillborn, five make it, right?
And five make it. One of them early on in the book contracts some type of illness
Parvo.
in parvo from the dirt, and Skeeta euthanizes it,
And he's beside himself about it.
and he's very upset about it.
And I should
So he
point out, I was
decides that
kind of,
he's going to make China a floor. So he's in the house salvaging. So this is just something that I thought, and this again is just an example, I think, of this like descriptive writing. So he's in there pulling out the linoleum. Esh is in there to see what he's doing, and then like the dad tries to come in, and it says the front door is the only way in. So Skeeta pitches the last tile and the box cutter out the window just as Dad is shoving his way inside. The sound of the wood like a gunshot ricocheting through the room so that I think he's broken the hinge, but the door stays upright. And then a sentence or two later, his boots hit so hard on the floor that he sounds like he's going to go through the rotted wood. He's not that much bigger than us. And it was like, I remember just like reading this, and it's like they're afraid of him. Like this makes me think of The Shining when Jack Nicholson comes through the bathroom door with the axe. Like that's what I feel like. This man just like forcing his way into the house. Like this is
Skeeta's
someone
throwing the
there
linoleum out so his dad doesn't see that he is
doesn't
taking
see that
from
he's
this
doing it.
dilapidated house, that he is taking this linoleum for his dogs. And later, when the father finds that Skeeta's making a pen for the dogs, he flips out on him and makes him tear it apart because he wants.
He says
Again,
that he says that he wants to use the wood for like the house, like to protect the windows and
yeah,
stuff.
the
But I
house
think it's also
is
just a way of
no, it's
exercise.
just
I
to
think it's
be
also just a way of being mean, right? And
yeah.
being mean and being demanding. And China steps up for Skeeta,
We learned in
right?
the
Like
beginning, one of the in like the second page, she's like China hate when they mentioned the dad, they're like China hates him.
China hates it because he's horrible to
Yeah,
them, right? And because she's also protective. She's a mother. So those are just kind of the things I have to say about the dad.
because he's talking about boarding up the house, and like this is a house he built with another guy. Like a, this isn't a couple of stories, like a 1,500 square foot house. This is like a four-room
Well,
like
and we can hear
shotgun
everything, right?
shack
Like there's
right
many
there.
scenes where Esh is inside the house listening to what's going on in the yard, or they're in the yard and they can hear what's going on in the
Yeah,
house.
he's got plenty of wood, is my
He
point.
just
Like
doesn't want Skeeta to do
he just
something
doesn't
for
want
China.
Skeeta to like be
He's just
doing
drunk and
something.
being
He's just
mean. And
drunk and
again,
being
that's kind of
mean.
where we see some of this abuse. And again, I think this sets the tone for his big moment later in the book that I think we should build up to a little bit.
Skeeta is frustrating with the dog. Like it is a frustrating. I feel frustrated as a reader for the other characters when like they're trying to have a conversation with him about like, could you get some groceries for us? And he's like he just comes back with dog food, nothing else. Like,
And he
dude.
goes and buys 250 pounds of dog food and like 10 cans of food, of human food.
But from Skeeta's point of view, he is the only person in that house the only person doing anything to make money because those puppies are worth eight hundred
Right. And
dollars a
he's
piece.
struggling to keep them alive.
Yeah, when he's got the five, he's got potentially $40,000. When the one gets parvo and dies, he's down to $32,000. And then when China eats one, he is down to $24,000. And that is the dad isn't making any money. Ash and Randall don't have summer jobs. Like they're just hanging around.
They
Like
don't have
no,
summer jobs, but they are also raising a child. They are raising Junior.
these are also children. It is not necessarily their job to make the money for this family. I'm just saying from Skeeta's point of view, one of the things I did kind of think about later is that he's the only one doing anything to make any money for anybody around there. And it's the dog. That's it. It's the only good thing he's got. It's the only thing he has that has a chance to make real money. Did I say $40,000? It is not $40,000. It is
You
for.
you did, and then you corrected it with
I'm sorry.
$3,200.
For.
So I thought
I
maybe
do
I
want people
misheard.
to know that I can multiply. It is $4,000, then 3,200, then 2,400 is what he is dealing with. Not 40,000. I can math.
Right. And we should talk about how large an amount of money that is
Oh yeah.
for people in this level of poverty.
Because when we go to Randall's basketball
For
game,
people not in that for people not in poverty, $4,000 I still think can be a substantial amount
that's
of
real
money,
money.
but $4,000 for this level of poverty is a substantial
No,
amount of money.
$4,000 is more than a lot of people. Most people, I would almost say, like whatever, like paychecks. Like that's a lot of money. When they go to the basketball game, when they go to Randall's basketball game, and they're sitting up in the stands. Randall's a very good basketball player. He's hoping to get a scholarship for the basketball summer camp. And Skeeta is also suggesting that if he sells these puppies and makes some money, he can pay for him to go to the camp if he doesn't get the scholarship. But when they're there, Junior wants some money to go to the concession stand, and they don't have like Big Henry reaches into his pocket and gives Junior a handful of change. Like that's how little money this family has is they don't have a pocket full. Like it's a Catholic school basketball game. Like the concession stand is like, five pieces of gum for a quarter. Like it's not.
Right. Exactly. They're not at the Knicks basketball game where
Yeah, yeah,
where a
yeah. They're
bag of
not.
chips is where a small personal sized bag of chips is $4 or $5, a small amount of money. This is a 25-cent bag of chips that Junior wants.
They're at a just yeah. Like they don't have a pocket full of change. Like they don't have a couple of quarters to give Junior. So no, $4,000 would change everything. You want to talk about Big
So
Henry?
this brings us to I want to talk about Big Henry so much. Man, do you know who I absolutely love is Big
He is
Henry for
the
just
tiny
being
glimmer of hope, the tiny glimmer of kindness. Not that's I shouldn't say that. There's other kind people and there are other nice moments within this narrative, but Big Henry is the like Esh tells us he is the only one of the guys who never came for her and tried to sleep with her.
Mhm.
He's constantly picking them up and driving them around. He looks so old that he can buy beer without getting carded, which I really like. Um, he seems to have like I don't know a little bit of money at least. He seems to work and have a little bit of his life together in a way that a lot of the other guys don't seem to. Um, I did. I'm con. I have a
so
question that I
so
want
he's
your take
so
on.
he's really looking out for Ash,
He's really looking out for Ash.
right?
The descriptions of him are all about like how big he is, but how gentle he is and how delicate he is and stuff. Do you think Big Henry is subtly coded as gay in this book?
I think that Big Henry is in love with Ash.
Can I tell you, I don't disagree with you. I'm genuinely not sure. There's a description of Big Henry. I'll quote it. He bounces when he walks, sways side to side on his tiptoes. He swings his arms like he's wading through water. He holds his beer bottles with three fingers. That's the description that is given of him. And I pulled it and went back to it, and like it all sounds a little bit like a sort of like bouncing, swishing walks, arms side to side, like the three fingers for the neck of a beer bottle, like the pinky out almost. Like all, I couldn't tell if that was meant to, and the fact that like Ash comments that like she was surprised he's the only guy who never tried to sleep with her. All of that combined to make me wonder if like that was, and they're young, so maybe it's just not a thing that he was coded as gay. But at this basketball game, I think you've got a quote because I can tell by your face that you,
I have a quote. I have a quote, and I'll, but I want to speak to that. I want to speak to a few things. So as you mentioned, Big Henry, we have that one quote of him. Another one we have because he's always described in this way of being graceful and gentle. When they're at the park, Big Henry comes to sit next to Ash, and it says, Big Henry alights in the grass next to me, graceful as a heron. A page or two later, Big Henry glances over at the bleachers and then rolls to his side and stands in one quick motion. Sometimes I forget he was an athlete. He's described as picking himself up by his toes and
yeah,
fingertips. And there are frequent things. These are just some things that were like kind of together in a couple pages so that I made note of. But I made note of it because of the number of times he is described in these graceful ways. But her brothers, the other men in this book, are described very differently. Randall is constantly described as like steely
yeah,
and hard. Skeeta is described in similar ways. He's tight, knotted ropes of muscle. The other men in this book, her father is described. I've already read a quote about how the father is described. The other men in this book are hard. They're hard, they are steely, they are described as such with this really descriptive language that Jesmyn Ward uses. And Big Henry is described very differently.
yeah.
He's always looking out for Ash, he's always looking over at her. I think that he is in love with Ash. At the basketball game, so prior to the basketball game, we are given a little backstory on Ash's father and mother and their
How
meet
they
cute,
met.
as it were. They were in school together, how they met. They were in school together. The father was always picking on their mom, like pulling at her braids, at her pigtails. And one day she just hauls around and slaps him. And after that, he starts leaving her little treats and little presents, pecans and candy and little tokens.
Blackberries.
And that is kind of the blackberries, and that is the start of their love story. So we are given that story, and then a few scenes later, after we've had, and I mean, this is the basketball game is about like I'm looking at halfway through the
Yeah.
book, just a little
No, it's
over.
Act Two.
We are given that story. We are very shortly after that. We are at the basketball game. He gives Junior the money. So Big Henry gives Junior the money, and Ash says he glances over at me, and it is as if he passed the money to me, as if he dropped it in my hand like chalky pecan candy, like mealy pecans, sun blackened blackberries. Additionally, at the end of the book,
No, I mean, maybe like so.
he asks her about her pregnancy. He says, this baby has lots of daddies, and I will always be there for you. I think I think Big Henry cares. I think he cares for her. I think he's in love with her. I think that he is setting up to be something, a man in her life that is different. I think he stands out for a reason. And listen,
No, you know what? Because we talked earlier about
you could
how
be
this
right.
is written through the female gaze. And you know what? That's probably, you're probably right. You know what? This book is not written the way like a guy would have written it, where like this description of Big Henry as being gentle, as being delicate, is meant to be some sort of opposite of masculinity or something like that. It is observational from a female's point of view, from a female author, and it's you're right because we do get that scene where she specifically tells us the story of her parents falling in love, and then it's a couple page. It's in the same time at the basketball game that we get that reference to it in Big Henry's actions, giving Junior the pocket full of change to be able to go to the concession stand. And then a few minutes later, he asks Ash if she wants anything. And she makes the comment
He
that
does.
like he says it just out loud, but everyone knows who he's talking to. So no, you're probably right. And it probably just points back to the fact that this is a book that is not written with like a male defensiveness of masculinity. It's like Paul Thoreau.
Right. So while we're talking about the way she's written, right? Like so the ways that she writes, the way she describes nature, the way you just feel yourself in this story, I want to talk about some of her I want to talk about some of these things that she's writing, some of these just like really beautiful ways that she is building tension in the book, that she is creating these parallels. Um, so some of the parallels I want to talk about, two of them that I want to talk about to start with. My God, I have so many.
We've been going for like an
I could
hour and
write a whole
15
page. I
minutes.
could
I just
write a
want to give you a,
all right.
there's no,
But we still have so much to
they can
talk
be
about.
wrong. I mean, I don't, it doesn't matter. I'm just giving you,
We have so much to talk about with this. We haven't touched, I feel like we haven't touched like some really important things. Skeeta's relationship with China
yeah.
parallels Manny and Esh's relationship
Mhm. Does it? Tell me. Wait.
a little bit. So in like an inverse, right? You know,
Oh, yes.
Skeeta is so loving. We get so many things like, she talks about how her grandfather built the house on the
Yeah.
pit for her grandmother. Her father built the house on the pit for her mother. And Skeeta wants to build this house for China. And she says that's what I think men do when they're in love. And that's what we see Skeeta doing with China. And we're told over and over again how much Skeeta loves China, how much he wants to care for her. He is
Ash
there
is
at the birth.
jealous of the jealous probably isn't quite right, but like Ash comments constantly about how the affection that China gets from Skeeta is aspirational for her and what she would like from Manny.
Absolutely. And then we of course see the opposite um, with Manny. The other parallel, another parallel, I should say, um, China's relationship. We don't see her pregnant; we see her having babies. So her relationship with motherhood and Esh's relationship with motherhood. Neither of these pregnancies are a choice by the women.
No.
Skeeta Skeeta works with Manny's cousin. He brings his dog Kilo over, and they mate their dogs. And it's not that, and China lets it happen. She doesn't fight the dog off. She doesn't prevent him from mounting her and impregnating her. Just like she just lets it happen, just
No, it's
like
one more, yeah,
Esh,
one more dude who shows up at the pit and has sex with like one of
who shows up at the
one of the
pit.
only women there.
So she is not pregnant by choice, just like technically, right? Just like Esh is also not pregnant by
We should
choice.
point out that Esh also gives us the little bit of that she like was always trying to use condoms. She always remembered like the pregnancy is not wanton disregard for her own like she made efforts or she tells us and we don't have any reason not to believe her, but she tells us that like she made efforts. There were always condoms.
She she doesn't understand how it's
Yeah, it
happened,
sounds
but
like yeah,
I always
which
use
is a
condoms.
very realistic thing that happens all the time to people. And but it's she was being careful in her words.
Yeah, she is careful in her words. So China, so one of the puppies dies of parvo. In another parallel that I want to talk about, China, so China's not feeling well. Skeeta thinks he's given her too much of the wormer.
Did you? I just want to say, did
He's
you happen
trying
to
to get her
notice
to
what the
eat.
name of the wormer is? The dewormer. It's Ivomec.
Uh,
It's a
Ivomec.
kind of it's like ivermectin, which is what people were taking instead of the COVID vaccine for a little while. Like certain people were like, I
Oh,
won't take
right.
the COVID
Yeah.
vaccine, but I will take ivermectin. That's what.
But I will take dog
Yeah,
dewormer, animal
animal
dewormer
dewormer.
to fix
It's a
COVID.
variation on that dewormer, but it's Ivanback. I just saw it. I was like, oh, I right that I remember. I remember that from a couple years ago.
So Skeeta has her back in the shed. He's letting her he's the puppies are feeding. At the same time in the yard, it's nighttime. The dad decides he's been banging at this chicken coop all day. He's been banging at this chicken coop all day. He's not making any headway with it. So he wants Randall to use the tractor and mow down the chicken coop. Randall doesn't want to do this because it's night. He doesn't know how to drive the tractor.
His
He's not
father is
familiar with
drunk.
it. The father is drunk. His dad is insistent. This is one scene. This happens all at the same time, and we are going back and forth between China being with her puppies, Skeeta's trying to get her to eat. The dad's been out there banging and making a racket all day, and then now he's got Randall trying to knock down this chicken coop. It goes back and forth, and the tension is rising in this scene. And two things happen at the same time. China picks up the puppy that looks just like the father. It looks just like Kilo. Takes his head in her mouth, shakes her head, snaps his neck, kills the puppy. At the same time, Randall's dad is telling him, please, like stop the tractor. Don't hit the gas or whatever it is that he says. Randall doesn't hear it, keeps going, and three of his father's fingers get severed
Three,
off.
three, his
Three
three
of
of them,
them.
his middle ring and pinky.
The tension in this scene is so beautiful. We are going back and forth between these things that seemingly have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And then they both culminate into a major thing, right? So Skeeta is angry. Skeeta is upset that, why did you do this? Why did you kill the puppy? The dad is, no, why? Why did you keep going? I told you to stop. His fingers are bleeding everywhere. Big Henry, by the way, just another shout out to Big Henry for being the best guy in this book. Drives everybody to the hospital, waits there with them all night. So they take their father to the ER.
I gotta also,
Something I think is interesting about that
the kids
scene,
do not care that their father lost three fingers. They
they
move
really
forward
don't,
as though they do not.
as though it's not
Randall
that
does
big of
not
a
feel
deal
bad.
that this
No one's all
man,
that worried about him. They occasionally bring food into him, and like they seem to just be happy to leave him in his room, and like it doesn't change much for them.
it does not change much for them. They are very unconcerned, and this is a very major
Yeah,
injury to lose any of your fingers for that matter, but to lose three of them is most of your hand. You were left with so little that you can do if you lose three of your fingers. And I mean,
no,
anyone who I think
and
has broken their hand or their wrist understands how important your hands are when you cannot use one of
and
them, or when one of them is not fully functioning.
Claude Batiste does not have a white collar job. No one is calling on Claude Batiste to do a lot of like mental. He's not doing a lot. It's not a lot of mental sweat equity going into his work. He is a laborer. He needs
No,
that
he's a man
hand.
who works
Yeah,
with his hands. Something I think is interesting in this scene because of the way they parallel, because of the way they go back and forth as tension rises, these two major things happen at the same time. We have Randall harming his father. Now, on purpose or not, I don't really know. I honestly question whether or not he heard his dad say to stop.
it's ambiguous.
I
It's
honestly
ambiguous
question
in
a
the
little
book.
bit that choice. It's
Yeah,
ambiguous. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know either way. So I'm actively saying I do not know, but I do question. Did he hear it correctly and choose to keep going? Or was there just a lot going on and he misheard? And then we have the parent China harming one of her children. And it's this interesting inverse.
isn't that what? Isn't it Kronos who ate his children in Greek mythology?
I think so. But Medea
Medea
kills
also
her
does kill her
children, and we do
children.
see
Yeah,
that, and we see that. So that's another parallel we see with the myth. And so we have in this book we have three terrible fathers. Um, Claude sucks. We have Claude. He's
Claude's not great.
not a great
Manny's
dad.
not doing.
But something that's interesting that we see in the father is that when we see these, he did not seem to be a terrible
Wait, who's the other
husband.
bad father? There's Claude. There's Manny.
Claude, Claude, Manny, and Kilo. And I say that Kilo is a bad father because, I mean, okay, they're dogs. A bad father is probably dramatic, but he does fight China. So when we're in the dog fight
That's true. Yeah,
scene,
I feel
him and China fight,
Is it
right?
the dog's fault that they are
He,
being used for
it's
pit bull
not.
fighting?
It is not.
That seems,
It is
I feel like that's
not.
not one we put. I feel like it's not fair to
However,
put that on Kilo.
if we are paralleling Esh's relationship with the father of her child with China and China's motherhood, right? If we are looking at these parallel mothers, China only kills one of her puppies, and it's the one that looks like the dad.
No, that's true. It's one that looks like Kilo. Like she's resentful of the imposition of motherhood that has been put on her that she didn't necessarily ask for.
She fights Kilo and almost kills him. She wins the fight. She almost tears his throat out. And she would have if Skeeta doesn't call her off and call her back. She's so loyal that the second he calls her, because what we know about pit bulls is when they bite, they latch on, right? Like that's what makes them. That's that's part of the fight. That's part of why they're trained. This dog fighting occurs. And then there's some honor, I think, to be the owner and to have control over that. So the very second that Skeeta calls her, she lets go and runs back to Skeeta. And the boys at the dog fight are very impressed by that. Look how loyal she is. Look how quickly she comes to him. It highlights the special relationship he has with China because the other boys do not have that relationship with their dog. They grab their dog by the hind legs and pull them back from the fight. He calls China and she comes back to him immediately.
Oh, you're right. I hadn't really put that together. Something you just reminded me of. She gets Kilo by the throat in that fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Esh fights Manny, or when she just beats on Manny later, she hits him in the throat.
Yeah, she does. The last two tensions and parallels in this book that I want to talk that I think are really important and leads us into the hurricane scene, which I think is just the best part. I honestly just think is the best part of this book. For one, just the description, it gets hotter and more humid every single day. And there's these beautiful descriptions, the sky is like a wet t-shirt. It's hotter every day. The air boils more every day. The insects are changing, like the sounds they're making are changing. The wildlife is changing in response to this storm coming. And it is this building tension, the heat and the sweat that you feel throughout the book. I felt myself getting hotter and sweatier as I was reading this book in anticipation of Katrina.
This is a book that has action sequences. There's three. There's like three
Mm-hmm.
like action scenes, which I know I'm sure I've read action scenes in other books. I read Jack Reacher books; those have action scenes in them. But in a literary novel, you don't get a ton of
In a
them.
work of like
Yeah,
literary
the
fiction.
first is the uh, when Esh and Skeeta go to steal the ivermectin from the farm on the other side of their property, and they get caught. And Big Henry's a lookout, Randall's a lookout, Junior's with Big Henry, and the people who own the farm where he's trying to steal the dewormer because he can't afford it come home, and they all have to run. And the kid's running through the forest. Like Big Henry's carrying Junior on his back, like Randall's running ahead. Ash is falling behind, and Skeeta throws some like lines to her, and she remembers that she was fast. She remembers that she was powerful, and she just like unlocks the like motor, and like they're all flying through the woods, and the dog is chasing them, and they get back to the pit. They get back to their own home, and as they come skidding into the yard, China breaks free out of the shed and comes and like takes the dog out right before it like gets to them. Great. The other one is the dog fighting scene itself is, I would say it's an action scene. There's like two fights that we get.
That's
We
an
get
action
Kilo versus
scene.
Boss, and then
Mm-hmm.
we get China versus Kilo. And then Katrina is, well, it is a tragic. I mean, it's an action scene in this book, though. Like I am questioning the chainsaw, but like we get the rising water, the race into the attic, the bursting through from the attic, the jumping into the tree, the jumping out of the, well, some of them jump out of the tree.
Let's come
Yeah.
to that. Mm-hmm.
So take us through the Katrina scene.
Okay, and so again, another parallel, something that I think is a that we see throughout the book. The tension of this storm that is coming. It's getting hot. It's getting hotter. It's getting more humid. Their dad is getting more bajiggity about preparing for the storm. They are starting to accept that, like, oh, there's legitimately going to be a storm. There's go not only are we going to have a storm, we were having a category 5 storm, which is the scariest thing that you can hear when you live in a hurricane state. And so we have this building tension for the storm and the storm itself, and it mirrors the tension of Esh's pregnancy. She doesn't want to believe it, just like nobody wants to believe that the storm is going to happen in the beginning of the
Oh, that's
book. Like the
true.
dad's like, here it is, and Manny's like, nah, there's always storms. It's not going to turn into anything. And she's like, man, like I'm hoping I'm not pregnant. We don't eat a lot, so like my period isn't always regular. I'm hoping it's that. She finds out that she's pregnant. Her brothers start to notice that she's pregnant, starting with Skeeta. Her brothers start to notice it. He kind of clues Randall into it. I honestly think Big Henry notices it as well. I think that he senses that something is up. If that's not necessarily the thing that he sees, he's sensing it. She's coming into more acceptance of it. She's reviewing like her own mother. She's looking at China and China's motherhood. And the storm is when the entire family finds out that she's pregnant.
So they're in the house and the water starts coming up through the
And it
floor. The truck floats by and they realize that the pit is flooded. The pit has overflowed, overrun, and it's filling up the house with water. And so they go to the attic without thinking because they can't go outside. But once they get up there,
I mean, where else? It's the only
yeah,
choice. Where else are they going to go? You hope that the water isn't going to rise that high. Some people just camp out in their attic
yeah, but the water does
until the storm's
rise that
over.
high.
But the water does come up.
Skeeta gets up. He's like, we are not drowning in this attic. The magic chainsaw. I won't dwell on it, but they chainsaw out the ceiling. They get out on the roof. And it's at this point that we are also following the end of this is the end of the Medea story in the myth is Jason comes running for her because she's killed their children. She's up on the roof of the house. In this story, with our characters, the Batistes and Katrina, so Esh has China's puppies in a bucket, and Skeeta's got China. He's taken his pants off and he's like stuffed her down into the pants and tied them around himself in a way so he can like use his arms and hold his dog simultaneously. China doesn't love this, but they get out on the roof and their plan is to get from the roof to the tree that's outside their house, go along the branches, and then they can kind of shove themselves off the tree through the water towards the grandparents' old house, the one they've been salvaging the bones of. And while they're in the tree, Skeeta wants to jump, and there's like this brief exchange with the father where he like doesn't want the father tells Esh to go, and Skeeta's like no, and the dad is annoyed because he thinks it's about the puppies, and it's Skeeta who says no, you can't. She can't go first. She's pregnant, and the dad hears this and shoves his daughter out of the tree into the roiling, flooding waters of Katrina to drown.
In the middle of a
In the middle of
hurricane.
a hurricane, the puppies go flying. The puppies drown.
So we've talked about how there's not judgment in this book. We are sort of simply presented with what's happening. We're just kind of presented with what the situation is with these people. And then so I think it's interesting. So he shoves her out of the tree. I want to come back to that. He shoves her out of the tree and she says, I kick, grasping at the air, but the hurricane slaps me and I land in the water on my back. The puppies flying out of the bucket, their eyes open for the first time to slits, and I swear, judging me as they hit. And I think that's interesting because she's been put in charge of the babies, and I don't think that the puppies are judging her. I think it's her
Yeah.
judgment of herself that she hasn't kept them safe, even though she is the victim, right? Even though she has been, it is not of her volition that the puppies aren't safe. She cannot keep them safe. She's falling out of a tree.
But then Skeeta screaming, he's upset, he's angry.
But first, why does he kick her out of why is that his reaction? Why does it is a knee-jerk reaction. Why is that his reaction?
I think because
What are your thoughts on that?
It's a woman's fault she got pregnant when she was a teenager. It's her fault. Like that's of all of the like He barely feeds his children. They live in filth, squalor, and abject poverty. He's fine with all of that.
He's not
He's
parenting
not
them.
parenting them. He barely pays attention to them except when he needs them to do something annoying because he's drunk. And like they're just there for him to bully. Uh, all of that he's fine with, but the idea of his teenage daughter being pregnant is like just the built-in, like it's her fault. It's her fault.
I do think that you were right. I think that you're correct. I do think that it is the reaction of it being her fault and like almost like a punishment. But just in thinking about it, this isn't like a devil's advocate thing. Just in thinking about it, just in looking at the book and looking at the things. There's something, and I think I briefly mentioned this when we talked about the dad in the beginning. So he's scary.
Yeah.
They're afraid of him. Our initial description of him is like he looked not drunk for a moment, which tells us a lot about him. He can't do what a mother would do. The wrong parent has died.
Oh yeah.
Because every flashback, what we see of the mother is that she was a good mother. We don't hear what kind of father he was when she was alive. We just don't get that. We just do not have a glance in it. We do see what kind of husband he is when she's alive. We do hear about their relationship. He loves this woman. When the tree crashes through their house and the water starts to rise, he grabs a Ziploc bag filled with pictures of her, family pictures and pictures of her,
Yeah.
so that they have that. He was wearing his wedding ring. We learned that
Oh, that's right.
when his fingers are severed, Junior pulls his wedding ring off of the finger and keeps it because he wants something of his mother. He's still wearing the wedding ring.
Oh, that's so
Junior
sad. I
six
forgot about that.
Junior is what, 7 or 8 years old? This
Younger?
woman has been,
5?
maybe he's a little bit younger, but he's not 2.
No, 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 no. You know, yeah, you're right.
He's a
You're right.
little
Yeah,
kid.
I don't know,
Do you know what I mean?
5 or 6,
He's a
something
little
like that.
kid.
Yeah.
He's 5, 6, maybe somewhere in there. So she's been dead for a minute. He must be 6 because Esh is 9 when her mother dies and she's 15 in this book.
Okay, so he's 6. All right.
So he's 6. But anyways, he's still wearing the wedding ring. We hear more than once in the book that Esh looks like her mother. I almost wonder if some of the reaction is just, this is what killed my wife.
Oh, that's I hadn't thought about that. Like,
To have that level of reaction. Now, I usually like to look for like the feminine in things. So there is a part of me that's like, probably you're right, and that there is a little bit of this like blaming her for being pregnant. But just looking at some of the things in the story, nothing is not included in this story. Everything that's included in this story is thoughtful, maybe except for the chainsaw, not dwelling on it. Maybe except
maybe
for the
someone will write
chainsaw.
in and tell us
Everything
what
else
it
in this
means. I don't
book,
know. I couldn't figure it out.
everything else in this book is thoughtful. It is called back to. It is purposely placed. This writing is very meticulous. This writing is very poetic.
Yeah.
And so it just made me look a little harder at what could possibly cause you to do that. What could possibly cause it to be your reaction? And I wonder if it's just this is what killed my wife, just this knee-jerk reaction to motherhood, right? To seeing that like this woman died. I'm failing as a parent. I cannot do what she did. The wrong parent died. They are stuck with me. And now I'm in just a knee-jerk reaction to like almost like this is what put me in that situation was pregnancy, was motherhood, was having a child, was having Junior.
That's a good call. I mean, that's like you're bringing the curse back upon this house, like that took the one good person the person we all miss because he is mourning. I know we're giving him a lot of grief. He is a shitty parent. I'm not going to make
We give him a
excuses
lot of
for
grief.
him,
He
but
is a
he is
shitty
he is
parent.
mourning.
But we see him as
Not
we don't
excuse.
see him as a completely different person in the past. He's a drunk in the past. That is in there. That he comes home drunk. He wasn't out making money to feed the family very well prior to this.
No, we see in the flashbacks, we see
don't,
a lot of failure on his part. We see him emasculated a lot.
yeah,
We see his wife catch a shark when he can't catch any fish. We see Ash go into the blues bar where they're at, where she's dancing with another guy while he watches from the
Mm-hmm.
side. We only he's the house is the one her father helped him build on their land for his wife. Like we don't see flashbacks of him being a provider or anything classically masculine or fatherly or husbandly. Like we see him in moments of emasculation specifically.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So I wonder if so like I said, just to bring up these different reasons because this is one of the most I remember
Or even when he just, I'm sorry to finish that
when we
thought,
shared this
when he
book.
comes home drunk, he's falling out of the truck and his wife is carrying him into the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
He comes out to like receive him and
yeah.
bring him in. I mean, this is a shocking moment in literature. I remember you telling me
Oh man.
when I remember texting you when I finished this book or calling you when I finished this book to talk about it and us talking about this scene and you saying like it's the first time I've that it was the most shocked you've ever been by something you've read.
Yeah. I mean,
And I remember the first time I read this, I thought I missed something. I thought I misunderstood what had happened. I had to go back to the page before and like reread it again. I thought I had missed something.
there's books that like I like
I
have
thought I didn't
had
understand what was
there's
happening.
books that have had twists. There's books that have had, I don't know, horribly disturbing things in them that have shocked me. But like plot wise, this was I I can't think of a there must be something else, but just without like a ridiculous swing like with I'm sorry, it's not like a ridiculous plot twist or something like that has been kept from me, the reader, deliberately to be surprising at the end. Just as far as a plot point that was like believable, accurate, and like I don't know, it worked within the story. He shoves her in the water. I was like, oh shit, that's
Yeah, I literally,
and
like I said, I legitimately thought I had misunderstood what had happened.
well, it,
I thought I missed, I thought I had just you know, like sometimes you're reading when you're reading something that's so like action packed, like a sequence like this, that sometimes you're just kind of reading so quickly almost to keep up with it. I thought I had missed a line.
no, he shoves her in,
I thought I had skipped something.
and it's handled so well because in that moment, Skeeta makes a decision. We stay with him for a moment while he like struggles and makes the choice to untie China. He can't hold her anymore, throw her in the water to fend for herself, and dive in after his sister. And I don't know if I even caught this the first time, but later in the aftermath of Katrina, so he gets her, they get into the grandparents' house and they ride out the storm there and whatever. We go to the aftermath. It's not until, I don't know, like 3 pages left till the end of the book, we find out that Skeeta's real name this whole time is not Skeeta. That's a nickname, I guess, but it's never been mentioned before. But his real name is Jason. In this scene on the roof, on like it it undoes the Medea myth that Ash has called us back to over and over and over again as she's reading it in her mythology book, which in the Medea myth, she kills her children. Jason comes to murder her and she escapes and that's what's left of her. In this one, it's the father causes her to kill Skeeta, Jason's children. Jason chooses her, like her as Medea. Jason chooses her, throws China into the water, dives in after her, brings her up to the house, and the dog swims off. But it undoes, like it breaks like whatever the cycle of that myth is. Like it doesn't happen the same way. Like we get the roof, we get the killing of the children, the puppies in this instance.
The puppies.
There's a Jason there, but he's not there to kill the Medea who cost him the children. He's not there to come for her and kill her. He's there to save her, and it's her family.
And he's never betrayed her.
No, he hasn't.
Skeeta has had her back this whole book.
Yeah,
He's known for a long he's known what's gone on. He's fought with Manny, who
yeah,
does betray her. If we're looking like right, we look at Manny as Jason for the whole book
yeah.
until this scene. He's Manny has betrayed her. He knows about the pregnancy. He tells her, you're a slut. It's not mine. I don't care." And in any woman in this situation is basically worst nightmare. but you're right that it's Jason, and we learned that
Yeah.
Skeeta's name is he's Jason
And
Batiste.
it's buried like pages later in the aftermath. It's not even like it's just like this little. It's the only time we see it. This one, someone I can't remember what it is. Someone just like calls his name for some reason. I don't know. They're taking a head
Oh,
count. I can't,
she says she's gonna
oh, that's right. He's gonna name the
if the
baby for
baby
him.
if the baby is a boy, she's gonna name him after Skeeta. She's gonna name him Jason. And if the baby is a girl, she's going to name it after her mother.
Yeah.
That's what she's reflecting on, because she has accepted. She accepts the pregnancy by the end of the book. The whole family knows about it. The father even comes back to be to apologize and to say, we'll be supportive. I'll be supportive.
Yeah, I gotta tell you
Or whatever. He
he's
says it in so many, in so many words. Big Henry
that apology.
tells her
Not sure how much good that
that
apology is gonna do. He's just,
an apology tracks with his character, though, I guess. But yeah, that apology. Sorry, I almost killed you and your unborn child.
yeah, yeah. My sorry, sorry that your father, nearly murdered you during a storm because you got pregnant in a way that is at least somewhat adjacent to my outright emotional neglect of you as a my child. And he just lying on the couch, he literally just says, "Sorry, I shouldn't have pushed you."
Yeah, sorry. So you're pregnant? Well, I'll try to be helpful. Yeah, no, it's a horrible
Yeah, he's like, "We got
apology.
to go get you checked out." Like, "Oh, thanks, Pop."
This scene, um, this scene though, so she's in she's in the water. Skeeta having to make this really heartbreaking decision to free China. Now, for what? Now China's kind of ready to go. She's trying to get away from him. She is trying to like, I can kind of stand on my own here. I'm strong. She doesn't necessarily want to be strapped. To Skeeta.
China as far as a Medea goes, does ride away from her Jason.
She does. And she back again in the Q&A. The Q&A is really lovely. So if anybody has the copy, if anyone of our listeners have the copy of this book with the Q&A with Jesmyn Ward, I very highly recommend you flip through it. But when she's asked about the Medea story, she's the interviewer asks, where do you see Medea in the book? And the first line of Jesmyn Ward's answer is, Medea is in China most directly. China is brutal and magical and loyal. Yeah. But that was a really that's a tough moment, I think. It was a tough moment to read, I think.
Oh,
It's a tough moment for
yeah.
China, to know that China's in the water,
Oh, the
Skeeta's
puppies are
screaming.
dead. All is lost.
He saves his sister, the puppies are dead. China is um is spinning away in the water. So this action sequence, as it were, it is one long sentence. Once Jason saves Ash. From that moment, it is one long sentence. It starts with, China is a white head spinning away in the relentless water, barking. And Skeeta is looking from her to me, screaming, hurry up at Randall. And it goes on from there to the end of the chapter, to them, to China spinning away. Randall's breaking the window. Randall and Junior get through the window. Skeeta pushes Ash through the window. He comes through the window. Their dad comes flopping over to them. They haul everybody up through the open ceiling to the roof. Everybody's safe. And it ends with, and Junior is rocking back and forth, squatting on the balls of his feet, his hands over his eyes because he does not want to see anymore. He is wailing, no, 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 no. That is all one long sentence, punctuated only by commas, which I just think is a beautiful choice as an author, because that is the way that you read this at this point. This is you can't put the book down at this point. Like, you're reading through it. My heart was like racing. I'm holding back tears. Like, this is one of the most emotional things I think I have ever read. And I love, and it was like I realized I got to the end of it that is all this one sequence, and it ends with the no, 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 no from Little Junior. And so I just think that was an interesting thing to point out. We're towards the end of the book at this point. I think we've talked about a lot of the major points. I felt particularly heartbroken by Skeeta losing China, but he's sure that she's going to come back. Do you think that what do you think? Do you think that China is going to come back?
I hope she
Do you
does.
think this
He makes the comment earlier that China's going to come back to him, and then after the fight, he says, "See, I told you she came back to me." Um, so I think as a reader, I, I I think that is our tell that he will eventually find China again, that she'll return.
and there's two things that make I know, and I agree with you. For one, I think this book ends on a hopeful note.
Plus, we've subverted the Medea myth so deliberately that like I want to think that it continues through the return, because in the myth she just rides away and Jason never sees her again, and he also never accepts responsibility for all the things that he did, or really comes to terms with the fact that like she gave him everything that he has. And our Jason, our Skeeta slash Jason, is not ungrateful in that way, and
No,
so I think she comes back. I also
I think she
need
comes
this
back.
book to I need I, I need to
But
think
for
that.
one, I do think it ends on a hopeful note. And then two things that make me think China comes back. For one, the sentence I just read, China is a white head spinning away in the relentless water, barking. She's not drowning.
No, she's not.
She's
She's
paddling,
swimming.
she's barking, she's swimming. She was struggling to get away from Skeeta. She has not been cast aside by Skeeta. It's almost a mutual decision. He has to go save his sister, and the dog is like, "Bro, I got it." She's strong. She's a strong, as Jesmyn Ward describes her, kind of this magical, loyal dog. And he says to her, like in the fight, make them know. That's what he's always saying to her, right? Like, make them know how strong you are, make them know who you are. I think that China comes back. I think China gets herself, I think she's able to like keep herself above water and kind of swim off. And I think she's going to come back. I think she's going to come back and be part of the family and be a female support to Ash as Ash enters motherhood among all of these boys. I think she's going to come back as this loyal female support, both for Ash and I think that she's going to come back to Skeeta.
I hope so. Let's do quotes.
I think that she's strong. My God, I could quote every single thing from this book, but I won't.
I have one that is, I lay for so long that when I raise my head from my arm, my hair has marked cursive I can't read into my skin.
I think I highlighted that too. So they go to the store. Ash steals this towards the beginning of the book. Ash steals a pregnancy test, and Skeeta I think went to get dog food, and they come across like the car accident. There's like two white people have been in a car accident, and
Yeah,
like Big Henry like waits and calls the ambulance, um, and describing the car that was in the accident. And there, caught in the pines, like a cat ascending a trunk, is a car. And I picked that one because I really like how something I noticed in this book, all of her like metaphors and similes and descriptions, a lot of times things that are, um, she assigns like human qualities to a lot of like natural things or like man-made qualities to like a lot of like natural things. And she assigns a lot of like natural nature-driven qualities to like man or man-made things. Which is just something I found interesting and that I thought was a kind of a quote that
when they're eating the squirrel, Skeeta slices at the stomach, and what comes sliding out is blue and purple, like so much wet yarn.
so again, something man-made out of something natural. And then another one I have, the wind moves a little in the tops of the trees and then dies away like a person leaving a room.
I have, I'm walking through the ripped net of the shade, which I liked. The like the way the shade scatters on the ground through like tree branches and leaves. I thought that was really good.
Oh, what to pick? Okay, I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna do one more nature one, just because because we've talked so much about like the meat of this book that I wanted to share. Just I think some of this like poetic writing. Skeeta yells as we pass a cathedral of oaks, leaving clouds in the dusty chapel at their middle. Oh, I do have one more quote that I think is worth sharing because it feeds into everything that we've talked about. And this is like in the aftermath of the storm when they go into St. Catherine. And that's the name of the town. Yeah, St. Catherine to see the damage that's been done, like literally on the coast, because like obviously they're a little inland. And she's collecting some things so she can go back and tell Skeeta what it looks like there. Because she wants to tell the story of Katrina, the mother that swept into the Gulf and slaughtered. It feeds into that Medea.
Yeah,
It feeds into that Medea story. And and just what we see happening, and again, another example of a mother
Medea kills a lot of
in
people in
this
that
book.
myth. She's um, yeah, she from her brother to the potential wives of her of Jason and so forth. All right, so that was Salvage the Bones.
So that was Salvage the
So
Bones.
I think
And
we
so
do we both recommend this. I think we would.
I feel like everybody should read this book, and I want to teach an English class and focus on this book.
Uh,
I love this book. I think everybody should read this book.
there's dog fighting in it, so if you are one of those people who can't experience something because a dog might not be okay in it, this is probably not for you. What are we doing next?
So, we began our podcast with Confederacy of Dunces, which is considered a comedy, and then it has gotten real dark. Since then with World War II, drug addiction, uh, the the greasers, the greasers versus the Socs,
Yeah.
and Salvage the Bones. And we have decided to lighten it up a little bit. And our next book is going to be Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine.
All right. We'll look forward to that. And I will point out that if anyone would like to write us and tell us about some of the books that we've read and their own opinions on it, or suggest some books that they think are pop classics, or say something nice to us, well, only that, only those things, um, then they can write us at readingpopclassics@gmail.com. All right. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine.
And thank you guys for listening.